London, 1845. The rain fell in heavy sheets against the windows of the modest townhouse on Whitechapel Road as Miss Eleanor Ellsworth stared at the letter in her trembling hands. The words blurred before her eyes, but their meaning remained devastatingly clear. "Father has lost everything," she whispered to her sister, Margaret. "The investments in the American railways have failed completely. We are ruined." Margaret rushed to her side, her face pale in the dim candlelight. "Surely not everything? There must be something remaining." "Nothing," Eleanor replied, her voice hollow. "The creditors will take the house within a fortnight. Father suggests I accept Mr. Thornton's proposal immediately, as our only salvation." "Mr. Thornton?" Margaret gasped. "The merchant? But you've only met him twice." Eleanor set the letter aside, her mind racing with possibilities, none of them pleasant. At 23, with no dowry and the stain of financial ruin, her prospects were dismal. Mr. Thornton, the quiet, reserved merchant who had shown interest in her at Lady Pembroke's soiree, now represented her family's only hope. "He is respectable, established in trade, and," Eleanor paused, searching for something more to recommend him, "he has kind eyes." "Kind eyes will not sustain a marriage, Eleanor," Margaret protested. "They will have to," Eleanor replied, rising from her chair with newfound determination. "For they are all we have left." 1 week later, Eleanor stood in the modest registry office, her hand placed in the much larger one of Mr. Conrad Thornton. He was a tall man with broad shoulders that seemed ill at ease in formal attire. His face was handsome in an unconventional way, a strong jaw, straight nose, and eyes the color of storm clouds. There was something refined about his bearing that seemed at odds with his profession as a merchant of imported spices and tea. "Conrad, take the, Eleanor." His voice was deep and steady, betraying none of the nervousness that Eleanor felt coursing through her veins. This man, practically a stranger, would be her husband, her lord, her master in all things according to law. When the ceremony concluded, Mr. Thornton, her husband, led her to a waiting carriage. Not the hired hack she had expected, but a fine black carriage with matching horses. No crest adorned the door, but the quality was unmistakable. "Your business must be prospering," she ventured, the first personal word she had spoken to him that day. A smile flickered briefly across his face. "I do well enough, Mrs. Thornton." The name startled her. Mrs. Thornton. No longer Miss Ellsworth. No longer the daughter of a gentleman, but the wife of a merchant. "Where are we going?" she asked, noting they were heading west, away from the commercial districts where she had assumed they would reside. "To our home," he replied simply, offering no further explanation. The carriage continued through increasingly fashionable neighborhoods until it turned onto a quiet, tree-lined street in Mayfair, a district far beyond what she would have expected a merchant of moderate success to afford. "This cannot be right," she murmured as the carriage stopped before a handsome townhouse. "It is precisely right," Mr. Thornton said, helping her down from the carriage. "This is my London residence." "London residence," she echoed. "You have others?" Again, that slight smile. "A small property in the country." "Nothing grand." The interior of the townhouse defied his modest description. Tasteful furnishings, fine art, and an unexpected number of servants greeted their arrival. Eleanor's bewilderment grew with each room they passed. "Your chambers are here," he said, opening a door to reveal a suite of rooms more luxurious than any she had ever occupied. "I hope they will be comfortable." "Mr. Thornton, Conrad," he corrected gently. "We are married now. Formality seems unnecessary." "Conrad," she said, testing the name. "I don't understand. This house, it's not what I expected for a merchant's residence." He regarded her thoughtfully. "I have been fortunate in my investments. There is much about me you do not yet know, Eleanor. I hope, in time, you will come to understand." With that enigmatic statement, he bowed slightly and left her alone in her new chambers, closing the door softly behind him. Eleanor sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the strange turn her life had taken. She had married a man to save her family from ruin, expecting a life of modest comfort at best. Instead, she found herself in a mansion with a husband who spoke like a gentleman, lived like nobility, and harbored secrets she could not begin to fathom. The following weeks brought little clarity to Eleanor's situation. Conrad proved to be a considerate husband, attentive to her comfort but maintaining a careful distance. He left early each morning, presumably for his business in the city, and often returned late. They dined together when his schedule permitted, engaging in pleasant but impersonal conversation. One evening, as they sat in the drawing room after dinner, Eleanor gathered her courage. "Conrad, might I ask about your business affairs?" He looked up from his newspaper, one eyebrow raised in surprise. "What would you like to know?" "Everything," she said, then tempered her request. "That is, I know so little about your life, your work. We are husband and wife, yet I feel I hardly know you at all." Conrad set aside his paper and studied her face. "My business interests are varied," he said carefully. "Import and export primarily, but I have investments in manufacturing, shipping, property." "And this affords you such a lifestyle," she pressed, gesturing to their surroundings. A shadow crossed his face. "You find our situation uncomfortable." "Not uncomfortable," she hastened to correct, "merely unexpected. My father spoke of you as a merchant of modest means." "Your father knew what I chose to present," Conrad replied. "I prefer to conduct my affairs quietly, without ostentation." "Why?" The question escaped before Eleanor could consider its impertinence. Instead of taking offense, Conrad seemed to consider his answer carefully. "I find that wealth attracts unnecessary complications. People behave differently around those they perceive as having money or influence." "And is that why you married me?" The words hung in the air between them, bolder than she had intended. "Because I did not know your true circumstances." His eyes darkened. "I married you, Eleanor, because from the moment I saw you at Lady Pembroke's gathering, speaking so passionately about educational reform for young women, I knew you were unlike anyone I had ever met." He paused. "Your father's financial troubles merely provided an opportunity one might not otherwise have had." Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I don't understand." "Don't you?" he asked softly. "A merchant proposing to the daughter of a gentleman, even one facing ruin, would normally be considered presumptuous. Your circumstances made my suit acceptable." Before Eleanor could respond, the butler entered with a silver tray bearing a letter. "An urgent message, sir," he announced. Conrad took the letter, scanning its contents quickly. His expression hardened. "I must go out." "Do not wait up for me, Eleanor." He was gone before she could question him further, leaving her with more questions than answers and the unsettling realization that her husband was far more complex than she had imagined. The next morning, Eleanor was surprised to find an invitation to Lady Harrington's summer ball among the Morning Post. As the daughter of a disgraced gentleman and the wife of a merchant, she had expected to be excluded from such elite gatherings. When Conrad returned from his business that evening, she approached him with the invitation. "I believe there has been some mistake," she said. "Lady Harrington has invited us to her ball." Conrad glanced at the invitation. "No mistake. We shall attend if you wish to. But merchants are not typically welcomed in such circles." A peculiar expression crossed his face, something between amusement and resignation. "Perhaps Lady Harrington is more progressive than most." "Or perhaps," Eleanor ventured, "there is more to you than you have revealed." His eyes met hers, something unreadable in their depths. "Perhaps." The night of the ball arrived, and Eleanor found herself ascending the grand staircase of Harrington House on her husband's arm. She wore a new gown of midnight blue silk that had mysteriously appeared in her wardrobe, far finer than anything she had ever owned. "Conrad," she whispered as they approached the entrance to the ballroom, "everyone is staring." Indeed, heads were turning their way, conversations faltering as they passed. "Ignore them," he advised, his voice calm but with a hint of tension. "Their curiosity will find a new target soon enough." But as they were announced, Mr. and Mrs. Conrad Thornton, the whispers grew rather than diminished. Eleanor caught fragments of conversation as they moved through the crowd. "Cannot believe he would dare." Such deception. The poor girl has no idea. A tall, elegantly dressed woman approached them, her smile sharp as a blade. "Mr. Thornton, how novel to see you in society. And this must be your new bride." Conrad inclined his head slightly. "Lady Morland. May I present my wife, Eleanor?" The woman's eye swept over Eleanor with cold assessment. "Charmed, I'm sure. Tell me, my dear, how do you find married life?" "Everything you expected." Before Eleanor could respond, Conrad intervened smoothly. "If you'll excuse us, Lady Morland. I believe my wife promised the first dance to me." He led Eleanor away, his hand tense against the small of her back. "Conrad, what was that about? Who is that woman?" "No one of consequence," he said, though his expression belied his words. Lady Morland enjoys stirring trouble where none exists. As the evening progressed, Eleanor became increasingly aware of the curious glances and hushed conversations that followed them. When Conrad was momentarily engaged with an associate, she seized the opportunity to retreat to a quiet alcove, needing a moment away from the scrutiny. "Mrs. Thornton." She turned to find a young gentleman regarding her with undisguised curiosity. "Forgive my intrusion," he continued, "but I simply had to make your acquaintance. The mystery bride of James." Conrad's voice cut through the conversation as he appeared at Eleanor's side. "I see you're making new acquaintances." The young man paled visibly. "Your Grace, I mean, Mr. Thornton, I was merely introducing myself to your wife." "Your Grace?" Eleanor's mind seized on the slip, but before she could question it, Conrad was steering her away. "Conrad," she insisted, pulling him into an empty corridor. "That man called you Your Grace. Why would he make such a mistake?" His jaw tightened. James has always had a penchant for inappropriate humor. "It didn't sound like humor," Eleanor pressed. "And it would explain so much, the house, the servants, the invitation to this ball." "Eleanor, please," Conrad's voice held a note she had never heard before, something close to pleading. "Not here. Not now." The desperation in his eyes made her relent. "Very well. But I expect the full truth when we return home." The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of dances and introductions. Eleanor was acutely aware of the scrutiny they faced, the curious looks that followed her husband, and the barely concealed surprise when he introduced her. There was a mystery here, one that grew more intriguing with each passing hour. As their carriage rolled homeward through the darkened London streets, Eleanor broke the silence. "No more evasions, Conrad. Who are you really?" He looked at her for a long moment, as if measuring her readiness for whatever truth he held back. Then he sighed deeply, resignation in every line of his body. "My name is Conrad Thornton," he began, "but I am also the Duke of Westmoreland." Eleanor stared at her husband, certain she had misheard. "The Duke of, but that's impossible. The Duke of Westmoreland is an elderly recluse who hasn't been seen in society for years." "That was my uncle," Conrad explained. "He died 18 months ago, and I inherited the title. Few people know of the succession because I have chosen to maintain a low profile." "You're a duke," Eleanor repeated, the words sounding absurd even as she spoke them. "I've married a duke without knowing it." "Yes." The simple confirmation hung between them as the carriage continued its journey. Eleanor's mind raced, trying to reconcile the quiet, reserved merchant she thought she had married with this revelation. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why the deception? Why marry me under false pretenses?" Conrad's expression softened. "I did not lie about who I am, merely what I am. Since inheriting the title, I have found that people see only the dukedom, not the man. The women introduced to me as potential duchesses were interested in the position, the wealth, the status, never in me. So you decided to marry someone who didn't know your rank." Eleanor's voice rose with indignation. "Someone desperate enough to accept a merchant." Pain flashed across his face. "That is not, I never intended," he stopped, composing himself. "When we met at Lady Pembroke's, you treated me as an equal, nothing more, nothing less. You spoke honestly, passionately about your beliefs. I wanted to know if that person, that honesty, would remain if you thought me merely a successful businessman. You tested me, Eleanor said flatly. I wanted a marriage based on mutual respect and genuine connection, not deference to a title. Eleanor turned to look out the window, processing this extraordinary revelation. And when you learned of my father's financial troubles, I saw an opportunity to help you while securing your hand before you discovered the truth about my position, he admitted. It was selfish, perhaps, but not malicious. The carriage stopped before their townhouse, no, Conrad's townhouse. One of many properties, she now realized, that must belong to the Duke of Westmoreland. Where is your main residence? She asked as they entered the house. Surely not here. Thornton Abbey in Yorkshire, he replied. My ancestral home. And when were you planning to take me there? To tell me the truth. Conrad hesitated. I had hoped to earn your trust first, to establish our relationship on personal terms before introducing the complications of title and position. Eleanor laughed bitterly. Well, your plan has certainly gone awry now, hasn't it? Tomorrow, I expect everyone in London will be discussing how the Duke of Westmoreland deceived his own wife. Eleanor, please understand, I understand perfectly, she interrupted. You didn't trust me enough to be honest. You manipulated circumstances to get what you wanted. What I don't understand is what happens now. Conrad's expression was grave. That depends on you. If you wish to continue our marriage knowing the truth, nothing need change between us except your understanding of my position. And if I don't? The question hung in the air between them, heavier than she had intended. Then I will ensure you are provided for, in whatever way you deem appropriate, he said quietly. I would never hold you to vows made without full knowledge. Eleanor studied her husband, this stranger she had married, seeing him clearly for the first time. Behind the revelation of his title, she glimpsed vulnerability, a fear of rejection that seemed at odds with his position of power. I need time, she said finally. Time to consider what this means. Conrad nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. He bowed formally and left her standing alone in the entrance hall, the echo of his footsteps fading as he retreated to another part of the house. The morning papers confirmed Eleanor's worst fears. The society pages blazed with the news, shocking revelation at Harrington Ball, Duke of Westmoreland emerges from seclusion with merchant's bride. Society was aghast last evening when Conrad Thornton, recently revealed as the new Duke of Westmoreland, attended Lady Harrington's summer ball with his new Duchess, a woman reportedly under the impression she had married a mere merchant. The former Miss Eleanor Ellsworth, daughter of the disgraced financier Sir Richard Ellsworth, appeared completely unaware of her elevated status. Eleanor threw the paper aside, her cheeks burning with humiliation. To be the object of society's ridicule, to have her ignorance displayed for all to see, it was unbearable. A soft knock at her door preceded the entrance of Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper. His Grace requests your presence in the study, madam, when you are prepared to receive him. His Grace. The formality now seemed to mock her. Eleanor dressed carefully, armoring herself in her finest morning dress before descending to the study. Conrad stood by the window, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. I assume you've seen the papers, he said without turning. Yes. He faced her then, his expression grave. I am sorry, Eleanor. This is precisely what I wish to avoid. By deceiving me, she challenged. By introducing you gradually to the realities of my position, he countered. The scrutiny, the gossip, the constant judgment, this is what it means to be a duchess. I wanted you to know me, to be comfortable with our marriage, before facing all this. Eleanor sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. What do we do now? We have several options, Conrad said, taking the seat opposite her. We could remain in London and face society together. We could retreat to Thornton Abbey until the gossip subsides. Or, he hesitated, you could return to your family while we determine if our marriage has any hope of continuing. The last option hung in the air between them, a tacit acknowledgement that their relationship might not survive this deception. Tell me about Thornton Abbey, Eleanor said, surprising herself with the request. Conrad's eyes widened slightly. It's a Tudor manor house, built on the site of an old monastery. The eastern wing dates to the 15th century, though most of the house was reconstructed during Elizabeth's reign. It sits on 10,000 acres in the North Yorkshire moors. 10,000 acres, Eleanor echoed faintly. The estate employs over 200 people, he continued, warming to the subject. The home farm produces most of our food, and the surrounding villages depend on the estate for their livelihood. And this is all yours. Ours, he corrected gently. If you choose to accept it. Eleanor stood abruptly, pacing the room as she gathered her thoughts. You should have told me, she said at last. Before we married. I had a right to know. You did, Conrad agreed. I was wrong to withhold the truth. His straightforward admission caught her off guard. She had expected justification, perhaps even anger at her presumption in questioning a duke. Why did you continue your business as a merchant after inheriting the title? She asked, genuinely curious. The business was mine before the title, he explained. I built it from nothing after leaving Oxford. When my uncle died and I inherited unexpectedly, I saw no reason to abandon the work I loved. This revelation shifted something in Eleanor's understanding of her husband. Not a nobleman playing at commerce, but a businessman who had unexpectedly inherited nobility. Take me to Thornton Abbey, she said suddenly. Conrad looked up, surprise evident in his expression. You wish to go there? If I am to decide whether I can be your Duchess, Eleanor replied, I should see what that entails, should I not? Your ancestral home, your tenants, your responsibilities, show me what my life would be. A cautious hope kindled in Conrad's eyes. When would you like to leave? Tomorrow, she decided. Let us escape this London gossip and see if we can salvage something from this marriage of ours. Conrad rose and approached her, stopping just short of touching her. Eleanor, I want you to know, regardless of my title or position, my feelings for you are genuine. I married you for yourself, not for any advantage or connection. Looking into his eyes, Eleanor found herself wanting to believe him. Prove it, she challenged softly. Prove to me at Thornton Abbey that you are the man I thought I married, duke or not. Yorkshire greeted them with misty mornings and rolling green hills that stretched to the horizon. As their carriage crested a final hill, Thornton Abbey came into view, a sprawling stone manor nestled against the backdrop of the moors, its Tudor chimneys and mullioned windows speaking of centuries of history. It's magnificent, Eleanor breathed, unable to conceal her awe. It can be rather overwhelming at first, Conrad admitted, watching her reaction closely. Overwhelming was an understatement. The entrance hall alone could have contained her father's entire London house. Rows of servants lined up to greet their duke and his new duchess, their curious gazes making Eleanor acutely aware of how unprepared she was for this role. Mrs. Thornton, the housekeeper greeted, then corrected herself with a slight flush. I beg your pardon, your grace. Mrs. Fenwick has managed Thornton Abbey for 20 years, Conrad explained. She knows every inch of this house and everyone in it. I look forward to learning from your expertise, Eleanor said, earning a surprised but pleased nod from the housekeeper. The tour of the house took the remainder of the day, staterooms, family apartments, guest wings, galleries filled with ancestral portraits and treasures collected over centuries. By dinner, Eleanor's head was spinning with names, dates, and protocols she could never hope to remember. It's too much, she confessed over their meal in the cavernous dining room. How does anyone master all this? Conrad's smile was sympathetic. No one expects mastery immediately. Even those born to such positions spend years learning their responsibilities. And I am expected to manage this household? To supervise dozens of servants, maintain centuries of traditions I know nothing about. You are expected, Conrad said carefully, to be yourself. The woman I married. Intelligent, compassionate, adaptable. The rest will come with time. Eleanor studied him across the table, still searching for the merchant she had married in this duke's bearing. Tomorrow, she said, I want to see the estate. The farms, the villages, the people who depend on Thornton Abbey. Conrad nodded, a hint of approval in his eyes. "I'll arrange it." The following day brought a new understanding of the dukedom's reach. They rode through villages where children doffed caps and adults curtsied or bowed at their passing. They visited tenant farms where generations of the same families had worked the same land. They toured the estate school, infirmary, and almshouses, all supported by ducal funds. "You maintain all this?" Eleanor asked as they rode back toward the abbey in the late afternoon. "It is the responsibility that comes with the privilege," Conrad replied. "My ancestors have protected and provided for these people for centuries. I am merely the current custodian." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, processing what she had seen. "This is why you continued your business interests," she said finally. "To support all this?" Conrad nodded. "The estate is wealthy, but agricultural returns can be unpredictable. My business provides additional security for everyone who depends on Thornton Abbey." This man, this duke, was not the aristocratic dilettante she might have expected. He took his responsibilities seriously, working to ensure the prosperity of all connected to his title. That evening, as they sat before the fire in a smaller, more intimate drawing room, Eleanor finally asked the question that had been forming in her mind throughout the day. "Conrad, why did you really marry me? With your title and wealth, you could have had any woman in England." He set aside his book, considering her question with the seriousness it deserved. "I told you before, I wanted someone who saw me, not my position. But there must have been others, women of rank and breeding who would have made more suitable duchesses." "Suitable," he repeated, a hint of distaste in his voice. "I've spent my life surrounded by suitables people, Eleanor. Men and women trained from birth to say the right things, make the appropriate connections, advance their family interests. When I met you, do you know what struck me most?" She shook her head. "Your honesty. Your willingness to speak your mind without calculation. When you argued with Lord Pembroke about the education of young women, you didn't consider his rank or influence, you simply stood your ground with conviction." The memory brought a flush to Eleanor's cheeks. "I was rather impertinent that evening." "You were magnificent," Conrad corrected. "And I knew then that I would rather have a duchess who spoke her mind than one who only said what she thought I wished to hear." His words touched something deep within her, a recognition that perhaps, despite his deception about his title, Conrad had seen and valued her for herself in a way few others ever had. "I am still angry that you didn't tell me the truth," she admitted. "As you have every right to be. But I think I'm beginning to understand why." Eleanor rose and moved to stand before him. "I need to know one thing more, Conrad. If I had known you were a duke when we met, would you still have pursued me? The daughter of a disgraced financier, with no dowry or connections." Conrad stood, closing the distance between them. "Eleanor, I would have moved heaven and earth to make you mine, regardless of circumstances. Title or no title, your family's situation never mattered to me." For the first time since discovering his true identity, Eleanor allowed herself to believe him completely. Reaching up, she placed her palm against his cheek. "Then perhaps, Your Grace, we should begin again, this time with complete honesty between us." His hand covered hers, his eyes reflecting the firelight and something warmer, more personal. "Nothing would make me happier, Duchess." Spring 1846. The London season was in full swing, the ballrooms and drawing rooms of Mayfair filled with the elite of society. None, however, was more eagerly anticipated than the ball at Westmoreland House, marking the official presentation of the new Duchess of Westmoreland to society. Eleanor stood before the mirror in her dressing room, barely recognizing the woman who gazed back at her. 6 months at Thornton Abbey had transformed the uncertain bride into a woman who, if not entirely comfortable with her title, at least no longer flinched when addressed as Your Grace. The gown of silver tissue over pale blue silk had been created by London's finest modiste. Diamonds, Thornton family heirlooms, adorned her throat and ears. But it was the quiet confidence in her eyes that marked the greatest change. "You look exquisite," Conrad said from the doorway, resplendent in formal evening attire with the Star of the Order of the Garter on his chest. "I look like a duchess," Eleanor replied with a small smile. though I'm still not entirely convinced I am one. Conrad crossed the room to stand behind her, their reflection a striking pair in the mirror. You were born for this role, he said, resting his hands lightly on her shoulders. The tenants at Thornton Abbey already adore you. The improvements you've made to the village school have transformed it. Small things, she demurred. Important things, he corrected. You've brought life and purpose back to Thornton Abbey. You've made it a home again. Eleanor turned to face him. Are you ready to face society? They were quite merciless about our unusual beginning. Let them gossip, Conrad said dismissively. We know the truth of our marriage. And they did. The months at Thornton Abbey had given them the opportunity to truly know one another, to build the foundation that had been missing from their hasty London wedding. Eleanor had learned the responsibilities of her position while Conrad had shared the burdens he carried as Duke. They had argued, compromised, and gradually forged a partnership neither had anticipated. They're waiting for us, Eleanor said, taking his arm. Time to present the mysterious merchant and his unwitting bride to society, this time with no secrets between us. Conrad's smile was warm as he led her toward the grand staircase. No secrets, he agreed, but perhaps still a touch of mystery. It wouldn't do for society to know everything. As they descended the stairs to the ballroom where hundreds of London's elite waited to scrutinize their relationship, Eleanor felt a surge of gratitude for the strange twist of fate that had made her a duchess without her knowledge. Had she known Conrad's true identity from the beginning, she might never have discovered the man behind the title, the hard-working, principled, occasionally stubborn man she had come to love. Ready, Duchess? Conrad murmured as they reached the ballroom doors. Eleanor squeezed his arm. With you, Your Grace, I believe I'm ready for anything. The door swung open, and the Duke and Duchess of Westmoreland stepped forward together, no longer divided by secrets or station, but united in a marriage that had begun with deception and flourished, against all odds, into love.